My mother-in-law whispered to my wife, "You could do better," not realizing I spoke her language. We were at a family dinner in their massive brownstone. I'd learned Polish in secret for 2 years. Every night after my wife fell asleep, I'd put in earbuds and practice until my brain hurt. I wanted to surprise her on our anniversary. Instead, I got a different kind of surprise. "He's pleasant enough," my mother-in-law continued in Polish, passing the roasted potatoes. "But he'll never provide like your father did. You settled, sweetheart." My wife said nothing. That's what killed me. I kept my face neutral, chewing my food like I hadn't understood. My father-in-law chimed in. "At least he's not ugly. The children might turn out decent." They laughed. My wife gave a small, uncomfortable smile, but still didn't defend me. For 3 years, I'd bent over backward for this family. I drove 4 hours every holiday. I sat through lectures about my career not being impressive enough. I endured comments about my weight, my clothes, my neighborhood. I thought they were just old-fashioned. I thought once they knew me, they'd accept me. That night, in our hotel room, my wife asked why I was so quiet. "Just tired," I said. She fell asleep within minutes. I stayed awake until dawn, replaying every word. When we got home, I started paying closer attention. I requested to work from home more often and noticed things I'd missed before. The way my wife would take calls from her mother in the other room speaking in Polish, the way she'd come back looking guilty. One afternoon, I overheard her say, "I know, Mama, I'm working on it." Working on what? I couldn't ask without revealing I understood. So I waited, watched, documented. 2 weeks later, I found the emails. My wife had been in contact with a divorce attorney, her mother's recommendation. They'd been planning this for 6 months. The strategy was clear. Wait until I finished paying off her student loans, then file. I'd paid off $94,000 of her debt in 3 years. Money I'd saved since I was 19. The emails detailed everything. How to hide assets. How to frame the narrative. How to ensure I'd be the one who looked unreasonable when it ended. Her mother's final message read, "Once you're free of him, we'll find you someone worthy of this family." I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I called my brother. He's an attorney specializing in family law. We talked for 4 hours. He helped me understand my options, what to protect, how to prepare. For the next 2 months, I played the perfect husband. I smiled at her family dinners. I nodded when her father lectured me about investments. I even thanked her mother for the Polish cookbook she gave us. In English, of course. Meanwhile, I quietly separated our finances. I documented every payment I'd made toward her loans. I gathered evidence of the conspiracy. I consulted 3 different lawyers to make sure my brother's advice was sound. My wife noticed nothing. She was too busy planning her exit to see mine. The night before our 4th anniversary, her mother called while my wife was in the shower. I answered in perfect Polish. "Good evening, Mrs. Kowalczyk. I hope you're well." The silence on the other end lasted 11 seconds. I counted. "You understand?" she finally whispered. "Every word. For 2 years now." She hung up immediately. 20 minutes later, my wife's phone exploded with messages. I watched her face go pale as she read them. She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Fear. "We need to talk," she said. "Yes," I replied calmly. "We do." I handed her a folder. Inside were copies of everything. The emails, the attorney consultations, the financial records showing exactly what I'd contributed to our marriage. Her hands were shaking. "My lawyer will be in touch Monday," I said. "I've already moved my things to my brother's place." She started crying, begging me to understand. "You were planning to leave me the moment I was no longer useful," I said. "I just beat you to it." As I walked toward the door, she grabbed my arm. "Wait, there's something you need to know first. Something that changes everything." I turned around. She was holding her phone, showing me a photo I'd never seen before. It was an ultrasound image, dated 3 days ago. My legs went weak. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. "I found out Tuesday," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was going to tell you tomorrow, on our anniversary." I stared at the image, the tiny blur in the center, the measurements along the side, 7 weeks, 3 days. "You're lying," I heard myself say. "This is another manipulation. Call my doctor, right now." She thrust her phone at me. "Her number's in my recent calls, Dr. Wierzbicki. Ask her yourself." I didn't call. I couldn't move. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sank onto the bed, still holding the ultrasound. "I know what I did was wrong," she whispered. "I know the emails looked terrible, but I was confused. My mother has been in my head my whole life, telling me I deserved better, that you weren't good enough." I started believing her. I started planning an exit I wasn't even sure I wanted. I said nothing. "But when I saw that test come back positive," she continued, "everything changed. I realized I didn't want to leave. I wanted this. Us. A family. I was going to tell my mother to stop. I was going to delete everything. You were going to tell her to stop," I repeated flatly. "After 6 months of planning my destruction? Yes. After I paid off nearly $100,000 of your debt? Yes. After your parents spent years telling you I wasn't worthy of their precious daughter?" She flinched. "Yes." I picked up the folder from where it had fallen. The evidence of her betrayal, now sitting next to evidence of our child. "I need to think," I said. I walked out the door. She didn't try to stop me. My brother Tomasz was waiting in his car outside. He'd insisted on being nearby in case things went badly. When I got in, I couldn't speak. "What happened?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed him the ultrasound photo. He stared at it for a long moment. "Jesus," he breathed. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, he started the engine. "Let's get you home. You can figure this out in the morning." But I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not that night. Maybe not for weeks. At his apartment, I sat on the guest bed and stared at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw 2 images. The emails plotting my financial ruin and the ultrasound of my child. How was I supposed to reconcile those 2 things? My phone buzzed constantly. Agnieszka, my wife, sending message after message. Please come home. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please don't make this decision tonight. I love you. I've always loved you. I was weak and stupid and I let my mother poison me. Please. I turned off my phone and finally fell into a fitful sleep around 4 a.m. The next morning, Tomasz made coffee and sat across from me at his kitchen table. So, he said carefully, what are you thinking? I don't know what to think. He nodded. That's fair. This is complicated. She was going to take everything from me. She and her family were planning it for months. I know, but now there's a baby. I know that too. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, trying to absorb its warmth. What would you do? Tomasz sighed. I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you what I know as a family lawyer. Tell me. If this goes to divorce and there's a child involved, everything changes. Custody, support, visitation. It becomes about what's best for the kid, not what's fair to either parent. If you leave now, you'll still be tied to her for at least 18 years. So I'm trapped either way. Not trapped, but connected. There's a difference. I stared into my coffee. What if the baby isn't mine? Tomasz raised an eyebrow. Do you have reason to believe that? No, but after everything I've learned, I don't know what to believe anymore. Then we request a paternity test. That's simple enough. I nodded slowly. And if it is mine, then you decide what kind of father you want to be, and what kind of co-parent you're willing to have. The word co-parent hit me like a punch. 24 hours ago, I was planning to walk away clean. Now I was potentially linked to this woman for the rest of my life. I need more time, I said. Take all the time you need. The apartment's yours as long as you want it. I spent the next week in a fog. I went to work, came home, ate whatever Tomasz put in front of me. I didn't call Agnieszka. I didn't respond to her messages. I needed space to think without her voice in my ear. On day 8, my mother-in-law called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dawid, she said. Her voice was different, smaller somehow. Mrs. Kowalczyk, I know you hate me. I deserve that. But please, can we talk? Just you and me. Not Agnieszka, not my husband. Just us. Every instinct told me to hang up, but curiosity won. Where? The cafe on Maple Street. Tomorrow at noon. I agreed and hung up before I could change my mind. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. My mother-in-law sat in a corner booth looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. No jewelry, no designer handbag, just a plain gray sweater and tired eyes. I sat across from her without speaking. She took a breath. I owe you an explanation. Not an excuse. There is no excuse, but an explanation. I waited. When I was 22, I married a man my parents disapproved of. Marek was kind and funny and made me happier than I'd ever been. But he wasn't wealthy. He wasn't connected. My family told me I was throwing my life away. She paused, stirring her tea. 3 years later, Marek was killed in a factory accident. No life insurance, no savings. I was 25 with a 2-year-old daughter and nothing. I had to go back to my parents with my hand out begging for help. Agnieszka's father is not Agnieszka's biological father. Stefan adopted her when she was 4. He's the only father she's ever known. She met my eyes. And he's never let me forget that he saved us, that without him we would have been nothing. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not even close, but understanding. So, when Agnieszka brought home a man who reminded you of Marek, I was terrified, she admitted. I saw the same patterns. The kindness, the humor, the modest income. I was so scared she would end up like me, struggling, dependent, humiliated, that I couldn't see anything else. You couldn't see that I would never let that happen to her. No, I couldn't. She wiped her eyes. I'm not asking you to forgive me. What I did was cruel and calculating. I poisoned my daughter's mind because I was too blind to see that you are nothing like Marek's situation. You have stability. You have ambition. You have a family who loves you. Had, I corrected. I had a wife who loved me, before you convinced her otherwise. She nodded, accepting the blow. All I'm asking, she said quietly, is that you don't let my mistakes destroy your child's chance at a family. Agnieszka made terrible choices, but she's not a bad person. She's a confused person who grew up with a mother who taught her all the wrong things about love and security. I stood up. I need to think. I know. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Before you go, I want you to have this. I opened it. Inside was a certified check for $94,000. This doesn't fix anything, I said. I know it doesn't, but it's yours. You earned it. Whatever you decide about the marriage, that money should never have been a factor. I took the check and walked out without another word. That night, I called Agnieszka. We need to talk, I said. Can you meet me at the house tomorrow? Yes, her voice broke. Yes, of course. I didn't sleep that night either. I lay awake, running scenarios through my head. Divorce, reconciliation, co-parenting from separate homes, trying again, walking away entirely. None of them felt right. All of them felt impossible. When I arrived at the house the next morning, Agnieszka was waiting on the porch. She looked thin and pale, like she hadn't eaten in days. We went inside and sat in the living room, the same room where we'd hosted her parents for countless dinners, where I'd bitten my tongue through countless insults, where I'd played the fool while she planned my destruction. I have questions, I said. I need honest answers. If you lie to me even once, I'm walking out that door and calling my lawyer. She nodded. Did you ever love me? Her eyes filled with tears. Yes, from the beginning. That was never a lie. Then why? Why the emails? Why the attorney? Why spend 6 months planning to take everything I had? She took a shaky breath. Because I'm weak. Because my mother has spent my entire life telling me that love isn't enough. That security matters more than feelings. That I should always have an exit strategy because men leave. She paused. And because I was scared. Scared of what? Of ending up like her. Alone and desperate. Crawling back to people who would never let her forget it. I would never have left you. I know that now, but back then, my mother's voice was louder than yours. I thought about what her mother had told me at the cafe. The first husband, the poverty, the shame, generational trauma passed down like a diseased inheritance. Did you know about Marek? I asked. Agnieszka looked startled. How do you know about him? Your mother told me. Yesterday. She was quiet for a long moment. I didn't know until I was 16. My dad, Stefan, got drunk at a family party and let it slip. He said my mother came to him like a beggar with a bastard child, and he was generous enough to give us his name. My stomach turned. Jesus. That's when everything made sense. Why my mother was so obsessed with status. Why she flinched every time Stefan raised his voice. Why she pushed me so hard to marry well. She met my eyes. I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong, but I need you to understand where it came from. Understanding where it came from doesn't make it hurt less. I know. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning inside me for 9 days. Is the baby mine? She didn't look away. Yes, I've never been with anyone else. Not once in 4 years. Will you take a paternity test? If that's what you need, yes, absolutely. I nodded. I need it. Then I'll schedule it tomorrow. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, normal. Families walking dogs, kids riding bikes. The world going on like nothing had changed. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Not yet. I know I haven't earned it. What are you asking for? She came to stand beside me, not touching, just close. A chance to show you who I really am. Not the person my mother made me, but the person I want to be. The person who loves you more than she fears being poor. I turned to look at her. Her mascara was smeared. Her hands were trembling. She looked nothing like the polished, confident woman I'd married. But there was something in her eyes I recognized. Something real. This is what I'm willing to do, I said slowly. I'll stay in the guest room. We'll go to counseling. Together and separately. You'll cut contact with your parents until a therapist says you're ready. And if at any point I find out you're lying to me or planning anything behind my back, I'm gone. No second chances. She nodded frantically. Yes, all of it. Whatever you need. And one more thing. Anything. I need your mother's lawyer to confirm in writing that he was contacted about divorce proceedings and that those proceedings are now permanently terminated. I'll call him today. I took a deep breath. Then we'll try. She burst into tears and reached for me. I let her hug me, but I didn't hug back. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. We found a couples therapist named Dr. Romanovsky, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had seen every kind of marriage disaster and didn't sugarcoat anything. Our first session, she looked at our situation and said, "You two have a lot of work to do. Are you actually committed to this, or are you just going through the motions?" Agnieszka said yes immediately. I hesitated. "Honest answer," Dr. Romanowski said, looking at me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm here because there's a baby, and because part of me still loves her, but I don't trust her, and I don't know if I ever will." "That's fair," she said. "Trust isn't rebuilt with promises. It's rebuilt with consistent action over time. The question is whether you're willing to give her the time to prove herself." I thought about it. I'm willing to try, but I can't promise more than that. That's enough to start. Over the following weeks, things slowly began to shift. Agnieszka cut off her parents completely. No calls, no texts, no visits. When her mother tried to come to the house, Agnieszka wouldn't open the door. I watched through the window as her mother stood on the porch, knocking and crying, eventually giving up and driving away. "That must have been hard," I said. Agnieszka's jaw was tight. It was necessary. She started individual therapy twice a week, working through decades of manipulation and fear. Some nights she'd come home from sessions looking hollowed out, like she'd been excavated. I didn't ask what they talked about. I figured she'd tell me when she was ready. Meanwhile, the paternity test came back positive. The baby was mine. Holding that piece of paper, something inside me finally cracked open. Not forgiveness, not exactly, but a sense of responsibility that went beyond the marriage. This child was coming whether I was ready or not, and he or she deserved parents who had done the work. At our 2-month session with Dr. Romanovsky, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Dawid, what would it take for you to fully commit to this marriage?" I thought for a long time. I need to see her make a hard choice, something that proves she's changed. Not just words, but action. What kind of hard choice? I don't know. I'll know it when I see it. Agnieszka looked at me with something like determination. "Then, I'll find a way to show you." I didn't know what she meant, but I was willing to wait. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Her father, Stefan, called the house while Agnieszka was making dinner. I saw his name on the caller ID and handed her the phone. "Your choice," I said. She stared at the phone for 3 rings. Then she answered. "Hello, Papa." I could hear his voice through the phone, loud and demanding. "Your mother is devastated. You're being cruel to her. This has gone on long enough." Agnieszka's hand tightened on the phone. "I'm doing what I need to do for my marriage. Your marriage to that nobody. He's turned you against your own family. This is exactly what I warned you about." I watched her face, watched the old patterns trying to reassert themselves, the need to please, to smooth things over, to keep the peace. But then something shifted. "Stefan," she said, her voice steady. "Dawid didn't turn me against anyone. You and Mama did that yourselves. You spent years telling me I married beneath me. You helped Mama plan my divorce. You treated my husband like a servant and expected me to laugh along. Everything we did was for your own good. No, everything you did was for your own ego. You wanted me married to someone impressive so you could brag at parties. You never once asked if I was happy." Silence on the other end. "And the way you treated Mama all those years," Agnieszka continued, her voice breaking, "throwing Marek in her face, making her feel like she owed you for giving us a home. That's not love. That's control. How dare you? I dare because I'm finally seeing clearly. I'm not going to raise my child in that toxicity. If you and Mama want to be part of our lives, you'll go to therapy. You'll apologize to Dawid, sincerely. And you'll stop trying to control us. Or what? Agnieszka looked at me. In her eyes, I saw something new. Strength. Or we're done. Permanently. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. Tears were streaming down her face. But she was smiling. Was that the hard choice you needed to see? She asked. I crossed the room, and for the first time in months, I hugged her back. Yes, I said. It was. That night, sleeping in the master bedroom together for the first time since everything fell apart, I finally let myself believe that we might make it. Not because she'd said the right words, but because she'd done the hard thing. Our daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday in October. We named her Zofia, after Agnieszka's grandmother, the one family member who had always treated everyone with kindness, regardless of their bank account. Holding Zofia for the first time, all the anger and hurt I'd been carrying seemed to lift. Not disappear. I don't think some wounds ever fully heal. But it became smaller, less important than the tiny human cradled against my chest. She has your nose, Agnieszka said, exhausted but glowing. Poor kid, I joked. She laughed, and for a moment, it felt like the early days of our relationship, before the whispers and the plotting, before I learned that the woman I loved had been planning to betray me. We still had a long way to go. Trust wasn't restored overnight. Some days I'd catch myself watching her, wondering what she was really thinking. Other days I'd find her crying in the bathroom, working through guilt and shame I couldn't fully understand. But we kept going to therapy. We kept talking. We kept choosing each other. 6 months after Zofia was born, Agnieszka's mother showed up at our door. I was in the living room with the baby when I heard the knock. Agnieszka was upstairs napping. Those first months of parenthood had left us both perpetually exhausted. I opened the door to find Mrs. Kowalczyk standing there. She looked different, older somehow, and smaller. Her usual designer clothes had been replaced by something simpler. No jewelry, no makeup. May I come in? She asked. My instinct was to say no, but something in her face made me step aside. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped in her lap. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I've been going to therapy, she finally said, 3 times a week. A woman named Dr. Adamska, who specializes in trauma and family systems. Okay, she helped me understand some things. About my marriage to Marek, about what happened after he died, about the choices I made with Stefan. I waited. I've spent my whole life terrified of being poor and alone, and I passed that terror to my daughter. I made her afraid of loving someone who couldn't protect her from the world. She looked at me. But you did protect her. You've been protecting her since the day you met. I tried, I said. You made it difficult. I know. She wiped her eyes. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm working on changing, that Stefan and I are in couples therapy, dealing with things we should have addressed decades ago. The baby stirred in my arms. Mrs. Kowalczyk looked at her granddaughter with an expression I'd never seen on her face. Pure love, uncomplicated by calculation. She's beautiful, she whispered. She is. Dawid, she met my eyes. I know I have no right to ask, but someday when you're ready, could I be part of her life? I want to be different for her than I was for Agnieszka. I want to show her that her grandmother can learn from her mistakes. I thought about it. Thought about the woman who had called me worthless in Polish at her own dinner table, the woman who had helped plan my financial ruin, the woman who had nearly destroyed my marriage. But I also thought about what I'd learned in therapy, about the cycle of trauma, about how hurt people, about how breaking the chain requires someone, somewhere to choose differently. I can't promise anything, I said. That decision isn't mine alone to make, but I won't stand in the way of a relationship with Zofia if Agnieszka agrees, and if you continue doing the work. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. One condition. Anything. Stefan apologizes too. In person. To my face. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll make it happen. She left without trying to see Agnieszka or hold the baby. I respected her for that. When Agnieszka woke up, I told her what had happened. She listened in silence, her face unreadable. What do you think? I asked. I think, she paused. I think people can change, if they really want to, if they do the work. Are you willing to give her a chance? She looked at Zofia, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. For Zofia's sake, I'm willing to try. 2 weeks later, Stefan came to our house. He stood in our living room, uncomfortable and defensive, clearly dragged there against his will. My wife says I need to apologize, he said stiffly. That's not an apology, I replied. That's a statement about what your wife said. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he'd storm out, but something held him there. Maybe the therapy, maybe his wife's ultimatum, maybe something deeper. He struggled with the words. I treated you poorly. I said things that were wrong. I supported a plan that would have hurt you. Why? He looked surprised by the question. What do you mean, why? Why did you treat me that way? I never did anything to you. I loved your daughter. I worked hard. I respected your family. He was silent for a long moment. Because you reminded me of someone, he finally said. Marek. His face went pale. My wife told you about him. She did. Then you know. He sat down heavily. When I married Helena, she was broken. She'd lost the love of her life and had nothing. I gave her everything. A home, stability, a name for her daughter. But she never loved me the way she loved him. And every time I looked at Agnieszka, I saw his face. So you punished me for reminding you of your insecurity. Yes, he said it like it hurt to admit. Every time I saw you making Agnieszka smile, giving her that same look Marek used to give Helena, I hated it. I wanted her to be with someone impressive, someone who would make people forget where she came from. That's not love. That's control. I know that now. He met my eyes. I'm sorry. Not because my wife told me to say it, but because I was wrong. You're a good man. A better man than I was at your age. I let the words hang in the air. Then I extended my hand. I can't promise we'll ever be close, I said, but I can accept your apology and move forward. He shook my hand, relief flooding his face. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Zofia turned one on a perfect September day. We held a small party at our house, just close friends and family. My brother Tomasz was there with his wife and kids, a few colleagues from work, and for the first time in over a year, Agnieszka's parents. They'd continued therapy, both individually and together. The changes were visible. Mrs. Kowalczyk no longer made cutting remarks about our home or our choices. Stefan actually engaged with me like a human being, asking about my work and listening to the answers. During the party, I found myself standing in the backyard, watching Zofia toddle around on the grass. Agnieszka came to stand beside me. Happy? She asked. I thought about the question. A year ago, I would have said no. I would have said I was stuck in a situation I never wanted, bound to a woman I couldn't trust. But now? Yes, I said, surprising myself. I think I am. She took my hand. I know I've said it 100 times, but I'm so sorry for what I did, for what I almost did. I know. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I turned to look at her. You don't have to spend your life atoning. That's not what I want. What do you want? I watched our daughter pick up a leaf and examine it with the focused intensity only toddlers possess. I want us to build something new. Not to fix what was broken, but to create something better. Something we can both be proud of. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I want that too. We stood there as the sun began to set, our families mingling behind us, our daughter exploring the world at our feet. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the easy path, but it was ours. 3 years later, I was offered a major promotion at work. The kind that would change everything. Doubling my salary, moving me into executive leadership. The catch? We'd have to relocate. To Warsaw. Agnieszka's hometown, where her extended family still lived. Where the memories of her upbringing lurked on every corner. What do you think? I asked her after laying out the details. She was quiet for a long time, watching Zofia and her baby brother Jakub play in the living room. I think, she said slowly, that I've spent too many years running from where I came from. Maybe it's time to face it. Are you sure? We can stay here. I can turn down the job. No. She looked at me with clear eyes. This is a good opportunity, and I'm not the same person I was when I left. I can go back without being swallowed by the old patterns. What about your parents? She smiled wryly. We've come a long way. Maybe being closer will help us finish the journey. So we moved. The first months in Warsaw were an adjustment. New schools for Zofia, new routines, new everything. But Agnieszka threw herself into building a life there. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others who had experienced the kind of emotional manipulation she'd grown up with. Her parents lived 20 minutes away. We saw them once a week, dinners that had evolved from tense to almost comfortable. Her mother had become a devoted grandmother, showering Zofia and Jakub with love that seemed genuinely unconditional. One evening, after the kids were in bed, my mother-in-law pulled me aside. I want to show you something, she said. She led me to her study, a room I'd never entered before. On the wall was a framed photograph I didn't recognize, a young man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. Marek, I said. Yes. She touched the frame gently. I hid this for 30 years. Stefan wouldn't allow it in the house, but after everything that's happened, I decided it was time to stop hiding. Does he know? He saw it last week. We talked about it. She turned to me. Dawid, I spent most of my life letting fear control me. Fear of poverty, fear of being alone, fear of not being good enough, and I passed all of that to my daughter. I know, but you broke the cycle. You and Agnieszka together. You're raising those children without fear, without the toxic beliefs that poisoned my family for generations. I didn't know what to say. I'm proud of you, she continued. Both of you. I know that might not mean much coming from me, but I wanted you to know. It did mean something, more than I would have expected. Thank you, I said. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Now go home to my grandchildren, and tell my daughter I love her. Tell her yourself. You're coming to dinner on Sunday. She smiled, a real smile, without calculation or agenda. I wouldn't miss it. Zofia started school the next year. She was bright and curious, making friends easily, adapting to the new environment faster than either of us had hoped. One day she came home with a question. Daddy, why do you speak Polish so well? I looked at Agnieszka. We'd never told the children the full story. They were too young to understand. Because I wanted to understand your mama's family, I said, and because I loved her enough to learn. Zofia nodded, satisfied with the answer. Later, after the kids were asleep, Agnieszka found me in the study. She's going to want to know the whole story someday, she said. I know. What will we tell her? I thought about it. About the whispered insults and the conspiracy emails. About the ultrasound and the confrontation. About the years of therapy and hard work. About the family we'd rebuilt from the ashes of what had been. We'll tell her the truth, I said. That marriage is hard. That people make mistakes, that trust can be broken and rebuilt, but only if both people are willing to do the work, and that learning Polish can lead to unexpected discoveries? I laughed. Yes, that too. She curled up beside me on the couch. Do you ever regret it? Staying, I mean. I considered the question seriously. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd walked out that night, if I'd followed through with the divorce. And then I look at Zofia and Jakub. I look at you. I look at everything we've built together, and I know that staying was the right choice. Even after everything I did, I pulled her closer. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. Neither am I. We grew together. Isn't that the whole point? She kissed me softly. I love you. I love you too. We sat there in comfortable silence, the kind that comes only from years of shared struggle and triumph. Outside, Warsaw hummed with evening activity. Our children slept peacefully upstairs. And in the study of a brownstone across town, a photograph of a young man finally hung in the light after 30 years of hiding. Some stories end with dramatic confrontations and satisfying revenge. Ours ended with something quieter, something harder, something real. 2 years after we moved to Warsaw, I got a phone call that changed everything again. My brother, Tomasz. His voice was shaking. It's Dad, he said. He had a heart attack. They're not sure if he's going to make it. I was on a plane within 3 hours. My father and I had never been close. He'd left when I was 12, started a new family, and treated my brother and me like afterthoughts. Birthdays were forgotten cards arriving a week late. Graduations were 5-minute phone calls. My wedding? He'd sent a check and an excuse. But here I was, flying across the continent to sit by the bedside of a man who had barely been present in my life. Agnieszka had wanted to come with me, but someone needed to stay with the kids. She'd kissed me goodbye at the airport with worry in her eyes. Call me the second you know anything, she'd said. I will. My father was in the ICU when I arrived. Tomasz met me in the waiting room, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He's stable, he said, but they're not sure about long-term damage. He was alone when it happened. Didn't call for help until it was almost too late. Where's Barbara, his second wife? Tomasz's jaw tightened. She left 3 years ago, took everything she could and disappeared. I hadn't known. My father never mentioned it, but then again, my father never mentioned anything personal. Can I see him? Yeah, but prepare yourself. He looks old, fragile. The man in the hospital bed didn't look like the father I remembered. The imposing figure who had towered over my childhood was gone, replaced by a shrunken, pale stranger hooked up to machines. His eyes fluttered open when I entered. Dawid? His voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. He tried to smile. You came. Of course I came. He gestured weakly for me to sit. I pulled a chair close to the bed. I didn't think you would, he said. After everything, you're still my father. His eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve that. Probably not. But here I am anyway. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the beeping of machines. I made so many mistakes, he finally said. With your mother, with you and Tomasz, with Barbara. I kept thinking I'd fix it later. There was always going to be more time. And now? Now I'm 72 and alone in a hospital room, wondering if I'll see another birthday. I thought about my own marriage, about the near miss, the rebuilt trust, the daily work of loving someone imperfectly. It's not too late, I said. Not completely. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? He reached for my hand with surprising strength. Tell me about your life, he said. Really tell me. Not the polite version. I want to know who my son became. So I told him everything. The whispered Polish at the dinner table, the discovery of the divorce plans, the ultrasound that changed everything, the years of therapy and rebuilding, the move to Warsaw, Zofia and Jakub, the family we'd created from the wreckage of betrayal. When I finished, he was crying openly. You did what I never could, he whispered. You stayed and fought for it. It wasn't easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. I spent 2 weeks at my father's side. Tomasz and I took shifts, ensuring someone was always there. We talked more in those 14 days than we had in the previous 14 years. On day 10, my father was moved out of ICU. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. On day 12, Agnieszka flew in with the kids for a weekend visit. I watched my father meet his grandchildren properly for the first time. Not a quick hello at a family gathering, but a real introduction. Zofia, now 5, was suspicious at first. She'd heard stories about the grandfather who never came around. But children have a capacity for forgiveness that adults often lose. By the end of the day, she was sitting on his bed, showing him drawings and chattering about school. She's beautiful, my father said to me that night, after everyone had gone to sleep. She has your mother's eyes. Don't tell Mom that. She might actually kill you. He laughed weakly. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm sorry, Dawid, for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to hear it. I hear it. Will you give me a chance? To be a real grandfather? To know your family? I thought about my own journey with Agnieszka's parents. The slow rebuilding, the hard work, the rewards that came only after the pain. Yes, I said, I'll give you a chance, but you have to earn it. Show up, be present, don't disappear again. I won't. We shook on it. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were full. My father recovered enough to travel. He visited Warsaw twice a year, staying in our guest room, playing with the grandchildren, slowly becoming the presence he'd never been before. Agnieszka's relationship with her parents continued to evolve. Her mother became someone I actually enjoyed spending time with, a transformation I never would have predicted 5 years earlier. Her father remained awkward but genuine, his walls slowly coming down with each family dinner. Tomasz and his family grew closer to us after Dad's heart attack. Shared crisis has a way of bonding people. Our kids became best friends, spending summers together, creating memories we'd never had ourselves. And Agnieszka and I? We built something I hadn't known was possible. Not a perfect marriage. I don't believe those exist, but a resilient one. A marriage that had been tested in fire and emerged stronger. A partnership based on radical honesty, constant communication, and the shared understanding that love is a verb, not just a feeling. One night, on our 10th anniversary, we sat on the balcony of our Warsaw apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below. Do you remember, Agnieszka said, that first family dinner, when you pretended not to understand Polish? How could I forget? What were you thinking? That whole time? I considered the question. Honestly, I was thinking about how much I loved you, how much I wanted your family to accept me, How confused I was about why they seemed to hate me. And when you realized what was happening, devastation, betrayal, rage, I paused. And underneath all of that, fear. Fear that the woman I loved had never really loved me back. She took my hand. I did love you. I do love you. I just had to learn how to do it properly. So did I. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes only from surviving something together. If you could go back, she finally asked, would you do anything differently? I thought about it seriously. About the pain and the growth, the confrontations and the reconciliations, about our children sleeping peacefully inside, about the families, both mine and hers, that had been transformed by our journey. I would learn Polish faster, I said. She laughed. That's it? That's the only change you'd make? Well, that and maybe not wear that awful sweater to your parents' house the first time. The green one with the reindeer? I loved that sweater. Your mother hated it. My mother hated everything back then. It wasn't personal. It felt personal. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I know, and I'm sorry. Again, forever. You don't have to keep apologizing. I want to. Reminding myself of how far we've come helps me appreciate where we are. I kissed the top of her head. In that case, apology accepted. Again, forever. Zofia started middle school. Jakub started kindergarten. Life accelerated in the way it does when children are growing and careers are demanding, and there's never quite enough time for everything. But we made time for each other. Weekly date nights, annual trips without the kids, daily rituals of connection, morning coffee together before the chaos began, evening walks when we could manage them. The hard work never stopped. Some months were easier than others. Old insecurities would flare up. Old patterns would threaten to reassert themselves. But we learned to recognize the warning signs, to address problems before they festered, to choose each other even when, especially when, it was difficult. On my 45th birthday, I came home to find the house decorated with streamers and balloons. My father was there looking healthy and engaged. Agnieszka's parents were helping in the kitchen. Tomasz had flown in with his family. Friends from work and life filled our living room. And in the center of it all, Agnieszka and our children waited with a cake. Surprise! Zofia shouted, even though I'd been expecting a party. Act surprised, Dad, Jakub whispered loudly. I did my best impression of shock, which earned giggles from both kids. Later, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Agnieszka found me on the balcony again. Good birthday? She asked. The best. She handed me a small box. One more present. Inside was a photograph in a simple frame. Us at our wedding. Young and hopeful and completely unaware of what was coming. I found it when I was cleaning out some old boxes, she said. Look at us. We had no idea. No idea about what. About anything. About how hard it would be. About how close we'd come to losing it all. I studied the photograph. The version of me in that picture had thought he understood love. He'd had no clue. I'm glad we didn't know, I said. If we had, we might not have tried. And now? I set down the photograph and pulled her close. Now I know exactly what love costs. And I'd pay it again in a heartbeat. She kissed me, soft and slow. Happy birthday, Dawid. Happy life, Agnieszka. We stood there as Warsaw settled into sleep around us, holding each other, grateful for every hard-won moment that had brought us here. 20 years after that first family dinner, I was an old man sitting in a different kitchen, our kitchen. In the house we'd bought together, in the neighborhood we'd chosen together, in the life we'd built together. Zofia was 24 now, working as a translator. She'd inherited my love of languages. Jakub was 19, studying engineering, already smarter than me in ways that made me proud. Agnieszka was across the table, silver streaking her dark hair, lines marking her face in ways that only made her more beautiful. What are you thinking about? She asked. That dinner. The one where I first heard the whispers. She winced slightly. Even after all these years, the memory carried weight. Why are you thinking about that? Because Zofia's bringing her boyfriend to meet us tomorrow, and I was wondering what we'll whisper about him when he's not paying attention. Agnieszka smiled. Nothing bad, I hope. Only good things. And if we have concerns, we'll voice them directly. Like functional adults? Like functional adults. She reached across the table and took my hand. We really did it, didn't we? Broke the cycle. I thought about her parents, both gone now. Her mother 3 years ago, her father just last spring. They'd become people I genuinely mourned. Her mother had spent her final years as a devoted grandmother, having finally learned to love without conditions. Her father had softened into someone almost tender, apologizing again on his deathbed for the way he'd treated us. I thought about my own father, still alive at 89, calling weekly to check in, sending cards that arrived on time, showing up for graduations and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays. I thought about our children, confident and kind, unafraid of love, unbroken by the patterns that had nearly destroyed their parents. Yes, I said, we really did. The next evening, Zofia arrived with a young man named Piotr. He was nervous and polite, clearly trying too hard to impress us. I watched him struggle through dinner, fumbling with his silverware, laughing too loud at my jokes. After the meal, I found him alone on our balcony, looking at the city lights. Nervous? I asked. He jumped slightly. That obvious? I've been where you are, meeting the parents of the woman you love, wanting desperately to be accepted. Zofia says you and her mom had a rough start. That's one way to put it. He was quiet for a moment. She said you almost didn't make it. That something happened early in your marriage that nearly ended everything. Did she tell you what? No. She said it was your story to tell, if you ever wanted to. I considered him, this nervous young man who loved my daughter, who reminded me in some ways of myself at his age, eager and earnest and completely unaware of what real marriage required. Maybe someday I will, I said. For now, just know this. Love isn't enough. It's necessary but not sufficient. You also need honesty and courage. and the willingness to do hard things when everything in you wants to run away. That's not the romantic advice I was expecting. Romance is for movies. I'm talking about reality. The question isn't whether you'll face problems, you will. The question is whether you'll face them together or let them drive you apart. He nodded slowly. Zofia's worth facing anything. Good answer. I clapped him on the shoulder. Welcome to the family, such as it is. He smiled, relief flooding his face. Later, as Agnieszka and I cleaned up from dinner, she caught me smiling. What? She asked. Just thinking about how terrified I was the first time I met your parents, how desperately I wanted them to like me, and now you're the intimidating father-in-law. Am I intimidating? Daweed, you literally told him that love isn't enough on his first visit. I told him the truth. She laughed and threw a dish towel at me. You're impossible. You love me anyway. Inexplicably, yes. I caught the towel and pulled her close. Thank you, I said. For what? For that night. For showing me the ultrasound. For giving me a reason to stay. Her eyes softened. You could have left anyway. The baby didn't obligate you to anything. No, but she gave me hope. Hope that we could be different. That we could break the patterns and build something new. And did we? I thought about Zofia in the other room, laughing with a young man who would probably become part of our family. About Jakub, calling from university with stories about his friends and classes and dreams for the future. About the decades of therapy and work and choosing each other over and over, even when it was hard. Yes, I said. We did. Agnieszka kissed me. Happy ending then? I shook my head. Happy middle. The ending comes later, and I'm not ready for that yet. Neither am I. We finished cleaning up together, moving around each other with the ease of 30 years of practice. Some stories end with dramatic confrontations. Some end with satisfying revenge. Ours ended the way most real love stories do. Quietly, imperfectly, still going. My mother-in-law had whispered that my wife could do better. She was wrong. We could both do better, and we did. Every single day. That's the truth of marriage. That's the truth of family. That's the truth of love. Not the fairy tale version. Not the Hollywood ending. The real thing. Hard and messy and absolutely worth it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I couldn't have it any other way. I can have it no other way. And that, in the end, is everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, 3 months after my 72nd birthday. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize, addressed to me personally. Agnieszka was at her watercolor class. She'd taken it up in retirement and become surprisingly good, so I opened it alone at the kitchen table. Dear Mr. Kowalczyk-Wiśniewski, we are writing on behalf of the estate of Helena Kowalczyk, deceased. Per her instructions, the enclosed materials were to be delivered to you on the 5th anniversary of her death. My hands trembled slightly. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Agnieszka's mother had passed, surrounded by family, at peace with herself and the world in a way she'd never been during my early years with her daughter. Inside the envelope was a smaller envelope, sealed with wax, and a leather journal I'd never seen before. The wax seal bore the imprint of a flower, a violet. I broke the seal. Dawood, if you're reading this, I've been gone for 5 years. That's long enough for the wounds to have healed, I hope, but not so long that the lessons have been forgotten. I asked my lawyer to wait until now because there are things I need to tell you that I couldn't say while I was alive. Not because I was afraid. By the end, I'd learned to stop being afraid, but because some truths need distance to be heard properly. This journal contains the full story. Not just my story, but the story of our family. Going back generations. The patterns that shaped me, that I passed to my daughter, that you helped break. Read it if you want, or don't, but I wanted you to have the choice. I'm writing this on my 80th birthday. Zofia brought her children over, your grandchildren, and watching them play in the garden, I finally understood something I should have understood decades ago. Family isn't about bloodlines or names or what you can provide. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other. It's about the hard daily work of love. You taught me that. You and Agnieszka together. I was 70 years old before I learned the most important lesson of my life, and I learned it from my son-in-law. The son-in-law I once thought wasn't good enough. The irony isn't lost on me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for fighting for my daughter when I was too blind to see what a gift you were. Thank you for giving me grandchildren who will grow up knowing what real love looks like. I wasn't a good mother-in-law. I wasn't always a good mother. But in the end, I was surrounded by family who loved me despite my failures. That's more than I deserved. If there's an afterlife, I hope Marek is there. I hope he can see what became of our daughter. I hope he's proud. Take care of Agnieszka. Take care of your children and grandchildren. Keep breaking the cycles. Keep doing the hard work. With gratitude and love I didn't know how to express when I was alive, Helena. I set down the letter and wept. For the woman who had hurt me. For the woman who had changed. For the years we'd lost to fear, and the years we'd gained through courage. For the strange, winding path that had brought us here. When Agnieszka came home, she found me at the table with the journal open. What's that? She asked. I handed her the letter. She read it slowly, tears streaming down her face. She never told me, she whispered, that she was writing this, that she felt this way. She couldn't, not while she was alive. Some truths need distance. Agnieszka sat down heavily beside me. What's in the journal? I don't know yet. I was waiting for you. We read it together. Helena's journal started when she was 19, the year she met Marek. It was the story of a young woman falling in love, then losing that love, then spending decades trying to protect herself and her daughter from ever experiencing that pain again. The entries were raw and honest in a way Helena had never been in person. She wrote about her fear, her manipulation, her desperate attempts to control outcomes she couldn't control. She wrote about Stefan and the bargain she'd made, security in exchange for love. She wrote about watching Agnieszka grow up and seeing Marek's eyes looking back at her, both a comfort and a wound. And then, in the final entries, she wrote about change, about therapy and self-reflection, and the painful process of becoming someone new, about watching me with her daughter and slowly realizing that I was nothing like what she'd feared, about the grandchildren who had softened her in ways she hadn't known were possible. The last entry was dated 3 days before her death. I am tired. The body is giving out, but the heart is finally at peace. For so long, I was afraid that loving meant losing, that opening up meant getting hurt. So I built walls, controlled outcomes, pushed away anything that threatened my carefully constructed safety. But safety isn't the same as happiness, and control isn't the same as love. Dawood understood that from the beginning. He loved my daughter freely, without conditions, without exit strategies. And when she tried to destroy that love, when I helped her try, he found a way to rebuild it anyway. That's real strength. Not the kind that comes from wealth or status, but the kind that comes from the heart. I wish I'd learned earlier. I wish I'd been different. But we don't get to choose our starting points, only our destinations. I'm glad I got to see where we ended up. I'm glad I got to be there. I'm glad. Agnieszka closed the journal and held it against her chest. She really changed, she said. She really did. Because of you. Because of us. All of us. Change doesn't happen in isolation. Agnieszka looked at me with tears in her eyes. I love you. I know. I'm going to keep saying it, every day, until one of us can't hear it anymore. Then I'll say it too. We sat together at the kitchen table, the journal between us, the letter from a dead woman who had learned too late but learned nonetheless. The sun was setting outside, casting golden light through the windows. Somewhere in the house, a phone rang. One of our children probably, or grandchildren, checking in, staying connected, carrying forward the patterns we'd worked so hard to establish. Agnieszka answered it, her voice warm and present. I looked at the journal, at Helena's final words. I'm glad. So was I. So was I. The end. Not the Hollywood kind. Not the fairy tale kind. The real kind. The kind that's still happening. The kind that never really stops. The kind that matters. My mother-in-law whispered that my wife could do better. In the end, we both did. Together. Always together. That's the whole story. That's everything. That's enough. Zofia's wedding was held on a crisp October afternoon, exactly 32 years after her parents' anniversary confrontation that had nearly ended everything. I walked her down the aisle in a garden venue outside Warsaw, the autumn leaves creating a canopy of gold and red. Piotr waited at the altar, looking exactly as nervous as I had felt at my own wedding all those years ago. As we walked, Zofia squeezed my arm. Thank you, Tata, she whispered, using the Polish word for father that she'd adopted as a teenager, claiming it felt warmer than the English version. For what? For everything. For staying. For fighting. For showing me what marriage can be. I blinked back tears. You're going to ruin my makeup, she laughed. You're not wearing makeup. Then you're going to ruin my dignity. That ship sailed at my 10th birthday party when you tried to do magic tricks. Those tricks were excellent. You set the tablecloth on fire. Minor miscalculation. We reached the altar. I kissed her forehead, shook Piotr's hand, and took my seat next to Agnieszka. She was already crying. Pull yourself together, I whispered. We haven't even gotten to the vows yet. I'm allowed to cry. I'm the mother of the bride. You've been crying since breakfast. I'm a dedicated crier. It's my best quality. I took her hand. The ceremony was beautiful. Zofia and Piotr had written their own vows, speaking about partnership and patience and choosing each other through whatever came. When they exchanged rings, I thought about my own ring, still on my finger after more than 3 decades. The same ring I'd almost taken off that night I walked out the door, certain my marriage was over. The same ring I'd kept on, even in my darkest moments. Because some commitments are worth keeping, even when they hurt. At the reception, Jakub gave the toast. He'd grown into a confident young man, an engineer who'd inherited his mother's determination and, hopefully, his father's stubbornness. I want to tell you about my parents, he began, and I felt Agnieszka tense beside me. Don't worry, I murmured. I don't think he's going to reveal any family secrets. Jakub continued. Most people would describe their parents as loving or supportive or embarrassing, and mine are all of those things. But what I've always admired most is their persistence. He looked at us, and I saw the child he'd been, now fully grown, speaking with adult understanding about things he'd witnessed without fully comprehending. My parents didn't have an easy road. I don't know all the details. They've kept some things private, which is their right, but I know enough to understand that what they have wasn't given to them. They built it, brick by brick, year by year, through difficulties I can only imagine. Agnieszka's hand tightened on mine. So here's what I want to say to my sister and her new husband. Marriage isn't a destination. It's a journey. And sometimes that journey takes you through dark places. When that happens, and it will happen because that's life, remember what my parents showed me. That the commitment isn't to stay on the easy road. The commitment is to stay together, even when the road gets hard. Especially when the road gets hard. He raised his glass. To Zofia and Piotr, may your road be easier than our parents' was. But if it isn't, may you face it with the same courage. The room erupted in applause. Agnieszka buried her face in my shoulder, crying again. You were right, I said. You are a dedicated crier. Shut up! I love you too. Later, after the dinner and the dancing and the cake, Zofia found us sitting alone at our table, watching the last guests mingle on the dance floor. Can I steal my parents for a minute? She asked. We followed her to a quiet corner of the garden. I wanted to give you something, she said. A wedding present. In reverse, she handed us a small wrapped box. Inside were 2 items, a photograph and a folded piece of paper. The photograph showed a young couple, clearly in love, standing in front of a modest church. The woman had dark hair and bright eyes. The man had a crooked smile and kind face. That's Marek and Babcia Helena, Zofia said. I found it in her things after she died. The only photo of them together that survived. Agnieszka's breath caught. I've never seen this. I know. She hid it for years. But I thought you should have it now. Both of you. The folded paper was a letter written in Helena's handwriting. To whoever finds this is the only photograph I have of my first husband, Marek. I hid it for decades because looking at it hurt too much. Then I hid it because I was ashamed. Ashamed of the choices I made after he died. Ashamed of the woman I became. But shame is a poor reason to destroy memories. Marek taught me that love is worth risking everything for. It took me most of my life to remember that lesson. And I only remembered because a young man named Dawid loved my daughter enough to stay when anyone else would have left. Whoever finds this photo, please give it to Agnieszka and Dawid. Tell them it's a reminder that love can survive anything, even death, even betrayal, even decades of fear. Tell them I'm grateful. Tell them I understand now. Tell them I love them. Agnieszka was crying openly now. So was I, if I'm being honest. Zofia hugged us both. I thought you should know, she said, that the story you started, the one about learning Polish, about staying when it was hard, about choosing each other over and over, that story didn't just save your marriage. It saved our whole family. Babcia Helena, Dziadek Stefan, even Dziadek Richard, in his own way. She meant my father, who had died peacefully 2 years ago, surrounded by family he'd almost lost through neglect. The patterns are broken now, Zofia continued. Not just for you, but for all of us. For my children someday. That's the real gift you gave us. Not just staying together, but showing us how. She kissed us both and returned to her new husband. Agnieszka and I stood in the garden, holding the photograph of her mother's first love, reading the words of a woman who had taken 7 decades to learn what love really meant. She really changed, Agnieszka said. She really did, because you gave her the chance. Because we all gave each other chances. That's the whole point. She leaned against me, and we watched our daughter dance with her new husband, our son laughing with cousins, our extended family, complicated and imperfect and real, celebrating together. I love you, she said. I love you too. The same words we'd said thousands of times. The same words we'd keep saying, until the end, and maybe after. I turned 80 in the same house we'd lived in for decades. My body was slower now, but my mind remained sharp. Agnieszka's watercolors hung on every wall. Photographs of children and grandchildren covered every surface. That morning, I woke early and made coffee the way I'd done for 60 years. Agnieszka was still sleeping. She'd earned the rest. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the sun rise over Warsaw, thinking about all the sunrises I'd seen and all the ones I had left. Zofia and Piotr were bringing their kids over later. Jakub was flying in from Munich, where he ran an engineering firm. Various cousins and friends would trickle in throughout the day. But for now, it was just me and the quiet and the coffee. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone this early. I shuffled to the door and opened it to find a young woman I didn't recognize. She was maybe 25, with dark hair and nervous eyes. Mr. Kowalczyk-Wiśniewski? She asked. Yes? My name is Marta Kowalczyk. I think we might be related. It took a moment for the name to register. Kowalczyk, Helena's maiden name. Agnieszka's original surname before she married me, and we hyphenated our names together. Related how? I asked carefully. My grandmother was Elżbieta Kowalczyk, Helena's younger sister. I knew the name. Helena had mentioned a sister, estranged for decades, who had left Poland for Australia in her 20s and never returned. Elżbieta passed away last month, Marta continued. I was going through her things and found letters from Helena. They'd been corresponding in secret for almost 40 years. She held out a bundle of envelopes, tied with faded ribbon. I thought your wife might want to see them. They're about everything. The family history, the things that happened, the things that were never talked about. I invited her in. When Agnieszka woke up and came downstairs, she found me at the kitchen table with a stranger and a stack of old letters. Dawid? What's going on? I explained as best I could. Agnieszka sat down slowly, staring at the letters like they might bite her. My mother had a sister, she said. She mentioned her maybe twice my whole life. I thought they hated each other. Apparently not, Marta said. According to these letters, they were in contact the entire time. They just couldn't reconcile in person because, she hesitated. Because of what? Marta unfolded one of the letters and began to read. Dear Elżbieta, I received your letter, and I understand your frustration, but I cannot leave Stefan. You know why. The shame would destroy us both, and destroy Agnieszka's chances besides. What happened with father was not your fault. It was never your fault. But the truth would ruin everything we've built. So we stay silent. We protect the secret. We survive. I know you think running to Australia is the answer. Maybe for you it is. But I have a daughter to think about. I have to give her the life I never had, even if it means staying in a marriage that makes me miserable. Please don't hate me for my choices. I'm doing what I think is right. Your sister always. Helena Agnieszka's face had gone pale. What happened with their father? She whispered. What secret? Marta handed her another letter. This one was from Elżbieta to Helena, written decades ago. Helena, I've made it to Sydney. It's strange and hot and nothing like home, but I feel free here. Free from father's shadow. Free from the lies we all told ourselves. I know you think staying and marrying Stefan was the right choice. Maybe for Agnieszka's sake, it was. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't pretend that our childhood was normal, that father was normal, that any of what happened to us was acceptable. You've chosen to protect the family name. I've chosen to protect myself. Neither choice is wrong. They're just different. But please, Helena, don't let the cycle continue. Don't let what father did to us shape how you treat your daughter. She deserves better than we got. I love you. I'll always love you, even from the other side of the world. Your sister, Elżbieta. The room was silent. Their father, Agnieszka said slowly. My grandfather. What did he do? Marta looked uncomfortable. The letters don't say explicitly, but reading between the lines, she paused. It seems like there was violence and control and things that happened behind closed doors that no one ever talked about. I thought about Helena, about her desperate need for control, about the walls she'd built, the manipulations she'd employed, the fear that had driven her entire life. She was protecting herself, I said, the only way she knew how. Agnieszka was crying. She never told me. Not any of it. I knew she was complicated, but this... She couldn't, Marta said gently. The shame was too deep. But she wrote about you constantly to my grandmother, about how proud she was of you, even when she didn't know how to show it, about how terrified she was of passing on the damage. She did pass it on, Agnieszka said. To me. I almost destroyed my marriage because of patterns I didn't even understand. But you broke them, I reminded her. We broke them together. She looked at me, her eyes red but clear. Does it ever end? The cycle? I don't think it ends completely, but it gets smaller. Each generation that does the work makes it smaller. Until eventually, hopefully, it becomes just a story. A warning from the past, not a trap. Marta stayed for the birthday party. We introduced her to Zofia and Jakub, to the grandchildren, to the extended family that had grown from so much pain. She fit in immediately, this long-lost cousin from across the world. Another thread connecting past and present, another piece of the story we were all part of. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Agnieszka and I sat on our balcony one last time. 80 years old, she said. You're officially ancient. You're only 2 years behind me. 2 very dignified years. I laughed. Nothing about us has ever been dignified. She took my hand. Tell me something you've never told me before. I thought about it. That first night, I said. When you showed me the ultrasound. When you asked me to stay. Yes? I almost said no. I was so hurt, so angry, so convinced that staying would only lead to more pain. I had my hand on the doorknob. I was 1 second away from walking out forever. What stopped you? You did. Not what you said, but how you said it. There was something in your voice I'd never heard before. Fear. Yes. Desperation. Yes. But also, honesty. Real honesty. For maybe the first time. And that was enough? It was enough to make me pause. And in that pause, I saw the ultrasound again. Our child. Our future. And I thought, if there's even a chance we can build something real from this wreckage, don't I owe it to that child to try? Agnieszka was quiet for a long moment. I've never told you this either, she finally said. But I had a plan. A plan? If you'd walked out that night, if you hadn't agreed to stay, I was going to raise the baby alone. I was going to move far away from my parents, start completely fresh and try to be a different person. Would that have worked? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But I knew I couldn't keep being who I was. Whether you stayed or left, something had to change. You were ready to change either way. I was ready to try. That's all any of us can do. We sat in silence, watching the stars appear over Warsaw. I'm glad I stayed, I said. I'm glad you stayed too. I'm glad for all of it. The pain and the growth and the hard work, the children and grandchildren and this ridiculous life we built. Ridiculous? In the best way. Who could have predicted this? That first dinner with your parents, me pretending not to understand Polish, having no idea what was coming. Who could have predicted we'd end up here? No one, she agreed. That's what makes it ours. I looked at her. This woman I'd married, almost lost, fought for, and grown old with. She was 80 years old now, white-haired and wrinkled and more beautiful to me than ever. I love you, I said. I know, she replied. You've been saying it for 60 years. And I'll say it for 60 more if you'll have me. She laughed. We might run out of time before then. Then I'll say it faster. She kissed me, soft and familiar. Happy birthday, old man. Happy life, old woman. We stayed on the balcony until the stars filled the sky, holding hands, grateful for every moment that had brought us here. The story wasn't over. It never would be. Not really. Because love isn't a destination. It's a journey. And ours was still going. Still growing. Still worth everything it cost. Every whispered insult at that dinner table. Every tear in our therapist's office. Every hard conversation and harder choice. All of it had led here. To this balcony. To this moment. To this love. I wouldn't change a thing. Not one single thing. My mother-in-law had whispered that my wife could do better. She was wrong. We couldn't do better than this. This was perfect. This was everything. This was home.